I'm very interested in what makes a good leader. And the tradition that I come from, an Ignatian tradition, would say, in the words of Christopher Lowney, who wrote a wonderful book called Heroic Leadership, and it's about leadership in the Jesuit Ignatian tradition, that in fact we are all leaders and we're leading all the time, whether we know it or not, because people watch us. And especially if you've got a title on your forehead which says that you are a leader, people are particularly going to be watching to see how you behave. I think there's been a lot of emphasis perhaps in the past more about the particular decisions you make, etc. And they're very important. But for me it's very much about what's the interior life of the leader and how is that informing the decisions they make? How does it mean they are with people? What are team meetings like? What's the conduct and behaviour of people in those meetings? And so as I've thought a lot about leadership over the last, 20 years or so I suppose, and read a lot about it, and the literature will bounce from it, their personal skills and traits through to the organisational structures you have. For me, I've come to a model which says it's actually about the human spirit, who we are as people. It's actually about what we do and the models of operation that we have, our practice. And it's also about the business processes that support the organisation. And I think that we need to be striving for an integrity within each of those three domains and an integrity across those domains. My experience is that sometimes you can have someone who's a lovely person, a lovely leader, they may be charismatic, but have they put into the organisation the policies and procedures and the organisational frameworks that mean when they leave it doesn't all fall over? And also we can have a situation where you have people who have got all of those mechanisms in place but they treat people terribly. And unfortunately, that happens as well. So I think we're really being asked in this tradition to think about who we are, but also what we do and what are the policies, processes, procedures and organisational infrastructure that we have set up to allow that leadership in everyone to flourish. And that's a real challenge. And of course I don't think balance is even the right word. It's holding those things in tension is probably a more accurate way of describing it. I think what it boils down to then is that we all know as CEOs or leaders, what I say is I get to see what doesn't work. What comes to my attention are the things when we really have a difficult HR decision to make or closing a program, etc. And I think it's at those points that we really need to draw deeply on who we are as people, making sure we have the processes there to consult, to make sure we're hearing properly what's happening. So we're hearing we've got grounded experience as we make those decisions, and inevitably those decisions are not quick decisions. If we're doing them well, they take time. We had a lawyer once who was working with us on a particular issue, and he kept saying, "You're within your rights to do this, just get rid of that person." And in my mind I kept going back to Catholic social teaching, I went back to our Jesuit justice tradition, and I thought, we can't. The goal might be the same, but we must follow this particular process, which was above and beyond what we actually needed to do in terms of meeting the legal or regulatory requirements. And in my view, when we draw on Catholic social teaching or in our Ignatian tradition, we're asking for more than what might be good enough. We're asking for more than what might be legally required. For example, I think in our care of the human person, we need to build into our institutions practice of reflection. And I know at Jesuit Social Services we begin all our meetings with reflection, but it's reflection that's inclusive of people from different backgrounds and faith traditions. But it's saying that we know that you're bringing your heart here and we want to nurture that, and we need that heart that is free to help us make decisions about whatever it is. whether we're closing that or opening that or an HR personnel decision. And we need to not just talk about it, but do it. We need to have times for reflection. We need to have times where we say, we're not ready to make a decision on this because we need more information. Or we need to be able to say, I'm bringing a bias to this. I'm very attached to this program. I'm not free about the decision. And I think they're deeper conversations that we need to have if we're wanting to have organisations that really reflect the depth of our identity. I think it's really important for leaders to be very clear about what the purpose is, what the purpose of their organisation is. So for us, we say our ultimate vision is about building a just society. And what it means is that is there as something that we keep our eye on and use to benchmark ourselves against in terms of various decisions that we make. So what happens is we've got our eye on the purpose, but then what we need to do is lots of things crowd that out. And they can be, you know, money decisions, people decisions, who we get on with, who we don't, who we want to collaborate with, who we don't, etc. But if we keep our eye on that, the leader really must spend time, I think, reflecting on that and noticing for themselves what's going on inside and taking time out every day to build in the practice of reflection. Where did I feel today that I really was able to give expression to that? Where did I feel actually a little bit awkward? It's quite simple in a way, but I think it really does come down to that because that's that inner voice speaking to us. But it's not just a funny interior feeling. We must be benchmarking that against something, and that is the purpose of what we're here to do. And I think if we keep coming back to that and lining up with that, it gives a great freedom. Because if that's where we're going, then we can say we really do need to make this decision. And I think to be true to ourselves and to others, of course we don't do that in isolation. We will have people that we consult with. We will make sure we're getting the information from the ground. And ultimately, though, it is taking that time, and the decision may be unpopular, but if we're clear that it lines up with our purpose, I think we're on very solid ground. I believe that each of us is created in and by and for love and sustained in love. And I think when I think of an organisation, whether it be Catholic Health and Aged Care, Catholic Social Services or whatever, to me they're almost like an umbrella that people huddle under, bringing their hearts to do heart work. And so the organisation provides a shelter for people to express that vocational heart, to love. And what we need to make sure in our organisations is that we don't get in the way of that, but that actually we have the processes that will enhance that, that will leave people free to love, that will make people a safe environment, make an environment where that will get nurtured and will flourish. Because it really is actually, what are we doing it for if we're not doing it for love and as that visible expression of God's love in the world? So when we think about that, and that being at the heart of the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing, what that means is it plays itself out in all sorts of ways, in terms of how we are with each other, in terms of who we're there for, in terms of not just whom we're serving, but how we are with each other. And I think some really practical ways for me about that is from the moment that we are recruiting for someone, are we recruiting for mission? Who are we after? So what are in our job ads? What are in our position descriptions? When we interview, what are we seeking? Who are we seeking? And I think right back there we need to have our policies and processes completely imbued with this orientation towards love. It's not a word often we use in an organisation, but I think in our tradition we should be very happy to use that word. But I also think that what can happen in organisations like ours is that it's possible to get a bit lazy, just to have the logo on the wall, the mission statement up, or to assume because we've got the name Catholic that in fact we've got a monopoly on this, or that we're doing it better than other people. And I think that's something for us to be really vigilant about. Just because we're Catholic, it doesn't mean anything in terms of what we're delivering, unless we are really, really drawing actively, daily on that tradition to inform and shape who comes to the organisation, how we nurture them, what we do, who comes in to receive a service. Like when I say that, how open, accessible, friendly, inviting are we? Or do we have methods for excluding people who don't fit our criteria of being easy to deal with? So I think they're all the ways it gets manifested, but I think really what we're talking about is love. That's the business we're in. As leaders, I think the most important thing we can do is make our origins, our fundamentals, Catholic social teaching, the particular charism that we operate out of, to make that available to people, the people who come and work with us. So really accessible, to make it contemporary and to make it useful. They're the three things I seek to do, and I think other leaders seek to do in their traditions. If we want to be able to really live and operate out of a tradition, we need to make it all of those things: accessible, contemporary and useful. And I think it is. I know, for example, working in the Ignatian tradition, there are so many gems in Ignatian spirituality that are really useful to people. In Ignatian spirituality, it's very much about starting from the foundation of gratitude, that everything is gift. And I think that really fits in beautifully with stewardship as well. So if we start from the position that everything is gift, then we have a sense that right from the beginning, what's our responsibility in terms of opening that up and sharing it with others? But it also has another orientation, which means that we're not starting from a problem-saturated response. How are we going to deal with that problem? But rather, everything is gift. Now, how can we enhance that? And I think another thing in the Ignatian tradition then is very much a call to our own change of heart and a call to standing in solidarity. But in this tradition, we draw very much on our mind and our heart, but always for action. And that's what I love about Ignatian spirituality. It is not enough to be moved, though being moved is the core from which we must act, but we always must act. So it's a mission on the move. There's a call to responsibility. And I think in each of our charisms, there is something that we can really draw on, but we need to make it available and accessible to the people that we're working with, and they will then enhance it and make it even richer. They'll make it their own if we can put it in contemporary language, if we can open up that story. And I think when we do that, it's not just being then a service to the people that we are coming into our organisations for assistance, but it's actually on about the ongoing nurturing and care of our staff, volunteers and everyone associated with us. When we think of a practitioner who, for example, is a surgeon or an artist, they have the instruments that they use, like the scalpel or their paintbrush, and that's really important. But for us, the core thing must always be the use of self. How do we use ourselves? We are the instrument. So how do we greet people? How do we speak to people? How do we use the various parts, our mind, our heart, our experience, and use ourselves as the instruments for engagement and for expressing that love? I think that's a key thing that in this tradition we've given not only permission to do, it's what we're about.